Ancient Alien Dinosaurs. By Neil A. Hogan. Frequency approaching 330,000 cycles per second. Confirmed. Microwave light pulse ready. Confirmed. Coordinates rechecked for exit and re-entry into Milky Way space/time. Confirmed. Activate flash jump procedure. After hearing the final order being given over the intercom, Cameron Jones gripped her seat as the Australian Research Expedition Ferry 01011901 vibrated, glowed brightly, then vanished from Earth orbit. She felt a mix of nausea and dizziness as the ferry momentarily materialized within a unique curvature of space/time, applied a new location frequency across its collective mass, then re-entered the Milky Way about 1 quintillion kilometers away from Earth. The hologrammatic display they sat around now showed a deep reddish-brown planet. The ferry was still traveling at 11,000 kilometers an hour, and the AI immediately began adjustment procedures to enter orbit around it. New data began scrolling across the image. They had appeared about 40,000 kilometers away on the dark side, with the planet above them. The planet had a 525-day orbit, 0.9 Earth normal gravity, a mass of about 5 sextillion tons, and was approximately 6 billion years old. An atmosphere with greater mixtures of nitrogen, carbon monoxide, and methane was spread thinly on the surface. About 200 million kilometers further out, a white star blazed. AI, please confirm this is the correct location. The commander's voice echoed in the assembly room. There had been a number of ships lost when flash technology was originally implemented, and there was always a slight fear that it might happen again. Cameron could see from the statistics they were in the right place. Confirmed. The moment the AI's electronic voice spoke, there was a cheer from her new exploration team. AI, please reposition the ferry so that the planet is below us. Cameron felt the hum of the M systems adjust the ship, and watched the planet shift below. It was better for the tender launch if they were above the planet. The hologram disappeared and was replaced by the white hair and rough features of the ferry commander. You're good to go. Take the tender and return within 4 hours. Just a reminder. If you're not back within 5 hours, you'll have to wait for the next ferry. Yes, sir. Cameron ushered her suited team members over to the airlock. Everyone began clipping their helmets on, eager to get started. They were now on the far side of the galaxy at the furthest star from Earth within the disk. If the mission is successful, she'll have more evidence of the existence of the Earth race that evolved before humans. And perhaps, for Earth government, some ancient technology too. Hashtag. Cameron's team had taken their seats in the tender and were waiting patiently for her to finalize launch checks. The tender was barely the size of a small van, with a few cupboards for folded-up spacesuits. Just enough to seat 6 suited people in a semicircle with space for a sliding door. To save on expense, it wasn't even airtight. A silver dome with small windows above spherical gravity manipulators humming on magnetic energy, the tender slowly turned in the storage bay, waiting for the bay floor to slide back. With the release of the remaining air from the bay, the tender slowly drifted down, away from the R ferry. The gravity control systems allowed for a slow deceleration from orbital velocity. There hadn't been a need for a re-entry burn in decades. Even so, all tenders were painted in pica heat shield nanoparticles, in case the gravity dampeners failed, or the velocity had been miscalculated, or the gas mixture of the atmosphere contained an unknown variable, or... Cameron was just glad of the backup protection. It would take an hour to get to the mission point, perhaps 2 hours to survey the installation, and an hour back again. While it would take them about 15 minutes to leave the planet, it would be 45 to get up to the same velocity as the R ferry. They needed to time their launch window to reduce travel time, and she had quickly developed the habit of always checking the minutes. Well, except when they were near high-mass star systems, when she was checking the seconds. She'd already lost a couple of decades miscalculating when she was a bit younger, and had lost count at how many times the government had had to cancel her death certificates. It was going to be a bit harder today, though. The installation they were investigating was in a time bubble. It had been discovered by a new type of drone that investigated temporal anomalies. They had no idea yet how that was going to affect their timekeeping. Cameron looked over her suited team. Everyone was making small talk through their helmets. A positive group, they were all happy to be there, and she knew positive teams worked better together. She disliked getting staff who were just doing it for the money. This was her 5th group that week, 80th group that year, and she'd long ago stopped being interested in getting to know any of them. As the point leader, her responsibility was to take the groups that were assigned to her by head office, send them on their missions, get the information, collate it and report back. That was the trouble with jobs these days. Apply via an AI with your available times, get hired within minutes based on your previous experience, then private flash directly to the job. No interviews needed. They had probably applied just a few hours ago, and ended up on the ship only minutes before it was due to leave. Every mission was unique and needed a different team. But this one was more unique than most. This planetary star system had been close to Earth about 112 million years ago, and may have been involved in the interplanetary war that had occurred between low-density alien civilizations. Earth government wanted to find out whether there was any ancient technology left over from the war, and also make sure that there weren't any threats. In the 100 years of exploring the galaxy via flash jump, they still hadn't encountered any threats. But then, what they had found so far was that most of their potential threats had died over 1 million years ago. All the aliens they'd met had been friendly. Perhaps they would find a hostile alien this time. Cameron shook her head, feeling annoyed at even having this thought. Even in this enlightened age of sharing perceptions with 63 million different alien races in the galaxy, humans still expected to find a threat somewhere. Johansson saw her looking at them. Are we there yet? A botanist, he was probably the most positive, and wanted to get a smile from everyone. Not that he would be able to see too many smiles through their helmets. Years of experience meant many politely laughed rather than just smiled. It was sometimes difficult to gauge body language in a spacesuit, apart from nodding and shaking heads. All right, listen up people. We don't yet know each other, but that's all right. It's a quick job. We visit the installation, analyze, catalog, then take what we can and leave. Cameron knew they were about to enter the atmosphere and wanted them alert. You're the archaeologist, said Bruce, the geologist and electrical engineer. How long do you think we'll really be down there? It depends on what we find. But with our holographic scanning equipment, and all your skills, I doubt we'll need more than an hour. Cameron looked at the ferry time. 8:35 AEST. I think we'll be back in time for lunch. Just then, the tender was buffeted by the thin atmosphere, and the astronauts were shaken in their seats. Statistics appeared on her heads-up display in her suit helmet. The AI is stabilizing the tender and will monitor the situation. The team was silent. Even after hundreds of these trips, and thousands of hours training, hitting the atmosphere still made everyone nervous. The tender got its balance and continued its curved drift down, the land slowly turning under them. In less than an hour it would arrive at the installation. And then they would find out what they really have. Hashtag. So, the drones could find nothing. Bruce held the frequency detector over the area, picking up basic basalt rocks and dust. Standard interstitial shifting, said Julian, a young temporalist. The drones aren't equipped to analyze buildings existing seconds forward in time. It was just the final drone that reported back the 100 square meter anomaly. Obviously some kind of structure. That's all we know. They walked around the dry, brown dirt, that stretched out like a baked desert, until it met with the yellow sky. About here, I think. Just inside the rectangle. Julian erected a tripod with a device on top that could detect the reality that the building was in. Readings validate that the structure is exactly 1 Planck second ahead. Attempting frequency change. He swiped across the screen and waited. I'm constantly amazed by temporal installations. They're not just 1 Planck second ahead. They're also matching the orbit of the planet, the position of the star in the galaxy as well as the position of the galaxy in the expanding universe. Not to mention all the other temporal anomalies that must have passed through the planet over the eons. It's remained in the same position for millions of years. Perhaps it's just attached to the core of the planet, and repositions itself to always be slightly above the surface. Cameron had been monitoring the conversation. Julian's open mouth could be seen through his helmet even from this distance, and Cameron suppressed a grin. Julian turned back to the device and recalibrated. You're right. It's using the kinetic energy of the core of the planet, so it is anchored to that power channel. A wavering, warbling signal began to interfere with their communication systems, and Cameron went over to have a closer look. How long before it breaks the barrier? It's still looking for the right frequency. Julian checked the display. I doubt I could get the device any closer for a better signal. But I've adjusted it to focus on the energy stream, so it shouldn't take as long. He peered closer at the readout. All right, it's found about 1,000 combinations of frequencies, so it is going to force hack all of them. Perhaps a minute. A bit further away, Johansson had been testing the dirt. He held up a sample. No bacteriological life. The methane in the atmosphere is not organically created. He headed in Cameron's direction and the others started to follow. She realized the danger immediately, quickly waving her arms to indicate for everyone to stay back. I don't want a wall suddenly appearing inside you. The nearest wall is about 5 meters over there. Julian pointed his gloved hand at a patch of browner dirt. You stay past that area, I'll stay with this. Right, everyone back. Cameron calculated about 20 meters away and headed there to wait. The others joined her. This may not be stable. Julian made some more adjustments to the breaker. The Planck field is shifting frequencies as it is being hacked. The device must continue hacking each new frequency to keep it in our reality. The moment the outpost can overcome the current hack, it'll disappear into the future again. There was a quiet ripple in the air, like heat off hot rocks, and the building slid into their reality. It wasn't what Cameron was expecting. She'd seen ancient installations before. Basic prisms that enabled aliens to observe developing Neanderthals and Cro-Magnon men. This was something very different. Black and silver tubes, green cables and other things, like a roof on top of 4 brown walls that seemed to be made of a hot glass-like upright liquid. Inset in one side was what looked to be a piece of skin with a vertical slit. An entrance. An almost invisible field surrounded the entire building, flickering in red and blue. Was it alive? The rest of the team shifted uncomfortably. It looked forbidding, and more alien than anything they'd seen in a while. Do you need anyone to stay outside, on guard? Johansson joked, nervously. Cameron knew that it was probably what they were all thinking. Then she remembered. Julian. Come on in. No rush, but I might need a doctor. Julian's voice sounded strange. The communication interface had compensated for something. Had his voice been sped up? On it? Rachna, their doctor, was about to launch herself at the skin door when Cameron stopped her. It still looks active. We don't know whether this place is booby-trapped or not. Mahdi, the software engineer, lifted his scanner and analyzed the field. A security system, though nothing lethal. An electric field of about 1 Hz, ideal for keeping animals away. So, this place was here when this planet had animals, asked Cameron. Or something else. Mahdi swiped through the stats on the screen. But the field would be enough to short out our suits, so I need to find a way to disable it. The field is around the entire structure, so we can't lift it up, destroy the generator, or for that matter overload it, said Bruce. Next to driving the tender into it to short it out, I've got nothing. No. Using the tender is not an option. Cameron shook her head. They needed to be inside, and there was already one of their team there. Julian. We can't disable the security. Can you turn off the field? There was a flash, and Maudie confirmed the field was off. They quickly clambered inside, pushing the slit of organic material apart, almost colliding with assorted alien equipment that had been dumped haphazardly in the center of the entranceway. Rachna headed in further to find Julian while the others explored the area. Banks of greenish-brown mushroom-like panels were near the entrance, a wide fleshy dome on top of each one. Maudie was excited and pointed at them. Organic, holographic systems. He reached out a gloved hand and pushed down on one of the mushroom shapes. Tiny fibers rose into the air from the fleshy dome and an image appeared, turning within it. A black, bird-like creature with a beak, and rat-like front teeth. A dinosaur. Cameron looked at it in amazement. It's an omnivore from the Cretaceous period. I think we called it an incisivosaurus. I thought you were an archaeologist. Maudie said. Ancient archaeology. I research ancient Saurian cities. Maudie moved the device again and it quickly flipped through more dinosaurs, then some animals, then something that caused Cameron's heart to beat faster. A dinosauroid. One of the people of the first civilization on Earth before humans evolved. Cameron leaned closer for a better look. This was everything she had been hoping for. Were there other records made by these aliens of Earth's distant past? She leaned closer to see if there was another way to access more records, and suddenly one of the cables snaked out, striking and sticking to her helmet. Her heads-up display began to flash from the interference, alarms beeped, and she cried out, trying to pull it off. Maudie reached up and pulled it hard, the strength-augmenting material in his suit straining against the flexing material. With an audible sucking sound that vibrated through her suit, the organic cable came off, and retracted into the console. Both Cameron and Maudie backed slowly away from it. What was it? Asked Cameron, still a bit shaken. I think that computer processes incoming creatures. Maudie reached out carefully and pushed the mushroom control to deactivate the hologram. The dinosauroid was probably the last one. The filaments lowered and the machine seemed to power down. Just then, Bruce came out from the right side. I found the force shield. Simple enough system. It even has an on/off dent, probably for a talon. Put a piece of wire in and it connects and disconnects. Lots of cables on the floor there too. Maybe we could rig something up to copy the records. It looks like they left in a hurry. Over here. Rachna's voice sounded worried. Just past the organic computer area, around to the left, stood about 5 green 2-meter-tall alcoves in a row. Bruce, Maudie, and Cameron looked at them, warily. Black, oily cables ending in 3 pincer-like calipers hung from inside. The pincers twitched and turned in their direction as the group stood near them. They had to walk past them to get to Rachna. Cages. Sleeping areas. Probing areas. Each contained a rectangular bed tilted at 45 degrees, but the outline for the body was dinosauroid. A section included space for a tail, if the creatures were lying on their left sides. A glass cover that looked airtight hung above, waiting on someone to walk closer to close on them. Don't get too close, said Cameron. They kept their distance and gingerly walked past. Around the corner there was another. Rachna and Jonathan were staring at a pod that had had its glass lowered. Bruce went over and peered at the pod suspiciously. How did he get in there so quickly? He only just turned off the shield. Cameron wiped the glass, then backed away with a start. Julian was lying on his side, naked, with a black cable embedded in his head. Rachna brought out her body scanner. It's been several hours for you, hasn't it? Julian couldn't hear her, so she put her hand on the glass and repeated, allowing the suit to transmit the sound vibrations. Our position in space/time isn't stable, Julian mumbled. Flicking between plank seconds could mean appearing again hours later, days later, or even weeks later. No idea. He waved a hand to indicate the pod. The system is repairing me. Keeping me alive. Detected what gas I needed to breathe and filled the pod with it. It even dissolved the suit. Atomic disruption. He pointed at his leg. A spindly bone seemed to be growing quite fast out of a stump covered in dried blood. Getting a new foot. Then he pointed over to an alcove where his previous foot stuck out of a piece of piping. It appeared through my leg when the building materialized. I guess I was lucky. Cameron looked around. Green regeneration alcoves. Monitoring systems. Security systems. The alcove's black cables continued twitching, hunting. Julian. Cameron put her hand on the glass. If you know how they work, are you able to deactivate the regeneration system so that they don't attack us? Networked. I would have to shut all of them off at once. Rachna shook her head. We need to get him a new spacesuit before we can turn them off. We can continue the regeneration back on Earth. Cameron looked defeated, but defiant. All right. Everyone, keep exploring the base and see what you can find. Just keep away from twitching cables. Rachna, keep an eye on Julian. Everyone headed off to explore, based on their individual mission statements. Cameron looked at the alcove next to Julian. Are they just regeneration pods? Julian lifted an arm. Check my skin. Cameron came over and looked through the plastic at Julian's upraised hand. The long yellow fingernails and scaly skin looked strange. Ichthyosis. Rachna pulled out her pad and scanned the regeneration pod. From these readings, his body is regenerating, but the system has decided which part of his DNA is the best to activate. All that DNA we've had in our genome for eons has been scanned to find the most efficient way to grow back his foot. That includes salamander DNA. The energy for this is coming directly from the cable in his skull. No food needed. I had a feeling that you were turning into a lizard, mumbled Cameron. Was it worth the price? When his foot grew back, it wasn't going to be the only thing that was scaly. Oh, don't worry about me. I've got my eye on a lovely lizard girl from planet X4238. I might have a better chance, this time around. Julian lay back, smiling, trying to make light of the situation. Great. Cameron feigned confidence she didn't feel. She turned to leave. Where are you going? Rachna's voice was slightly higher than normal. Scared. Julian needs another suit, said Cameron. Someone's got to get it. She left through the skin entrance and headed back to the tender. Unbeknownst to her, the installation quietly disappeared behind her. Hashtag. The suit was easy to collect from one of the storage cupboards, and Cameron was about to leave the tender when a voice screeched through her communication system. This is the final call for the Cameron Jones team of Mission A25B. Due to financial considerations, if you do not respond within the next hour, we will need to assume you are all dead. Cameron yelled. We're here. We're all here. The building keeps jumping the time track. I'm heading back there now. The AI bleeped. Confirmed. It has been 17 Earth days since you left the tender. Flash communication transmission is being sent to Earth government now. Report status of individual team members. Cameron Jones. Safe. Julian Swahala. Currently undergoing regeneration due to the loss of a foot. Johansson Lieberman. Safe. Bruce Arnold. Safe. Rachna Patel. Safe. Mahdi Hassan. Safe. This AI does not detect other life forms. What? Cameron spun around to look at the installation, but it was gone. The installation is outside space/time. I need to retrieve our missing crew members. A request has been sent, said the drone. We are recalling Commander Hunter and our ferry, designation 01011901, to the area. Thank you, said Cameron. She collected the spare suit and helmet, and headed back to the place where the building was. On the ground, there was a track of footprints that led to the invisible position of the opening. She guessed she would simply have to wait. But now she was worried about relative time. How long would she be gone this time? And what about time inside the building? They might have been in there for days. There was a flash and the building was back. She immediately entered with the spare spacesuit, and was shocked at what she found. A 2-meter-tall dinosaur stood in front of her. Scaly, a few spikes on his head, no clothes. He was almost unrecognizable, but Cameron sensed who it was straight away. Julian's foot had fully grown with talons, and he now sported a long tail. He looked at the suit she had brought him. I won't be needing that. The atmosphere was still thick enough to carry his voice through her suit. It was now a loud, guttural sound, with limited consonant sounds. No long conversations then. The other crew were already in the alcoves, on their sides, naked and being converted, their tails almost complete. There was no way out for any of them. I don't get it, said Cameron. Why would they choose this? It is a superior form, said Julian. Adapted for this atmosphere. Cameron began backing out of the installation. The team would not have willingly chosen to turn into dinosauroids. Julian must have forced them into the machines. I'm quite happy being human, she said, as Julian's yellow eyes flicked back and forth, his pupils mere slits. He lifted up a scaly green claw. Was he going to attack her? She turned and ran, diving through the slit, Julian stomping after her, his tail swishing behind him. If he could really survive in this environment, she didn't have a hope. If this dinosaur creature could capture her. In her spacesuit, she stumbled and ran back to the tender, hoping that Julian wasn't used to his new body. Then she blinked. In the seconds she'd been inside, a day had already passed. The world had turned and now its sun was on the other side. It was dark, and she couldn't see the tender. She ran blindly in the pitch-black darkness, knowing lizards had much better eyesight than humans. Then she could have kicked herself. This suit was fitted with night vision. Night vision on. Two bright eyes suddenly stared at her from out of the now greenish hues, and she almost screamed. She jumped away and ran faster, dodging any potential claw swipes as she charged towards the now visible tender. How did he get that close so quickly? A single rend from those claws and she would be dead, unable to survive in the carbon monoxide atmosphere. He didn't do it meant he wanted her alive. She looked back to see how close he was and was surprised to see he was bending forward, stumbling, not able to keep up. He reached out a claw towards her, then collapsed onto the ground. Hadn't he adapted to the atmosphere yet? Or was it something else? She dived into the still open hatch of the tender and slid it shut behind her. She turned the lights on, her night vision off, and looked around in relief. She was safe. She turned off the lights again, then looked through the window. The building continued to flicker slightly in the dark, the space/time location fighting the temporal hacking system set up by human Julian. In the dirt, she could see alien dinosaur Julian struggling to get back to the entrance, to the protection of the building. Then she understood. Cold-blooded lizard. With no heat to keep him energized, Julian had no way of getting to her. He was weak at night. Perhaps that could be their advantage. The saurian silhouette slid back into the installation to monitor its other prey. Cameron sat in her seat, breathing heavily, appalled. In only a few minutes of her time, all her team had been put into the lizard conversion machines, and were now ready to attack humans. They'd been de-evolved into something closer to intelligent dinosaurs, but dinosaurs with one mission. Conquest. She knew how these bases worked. This wasn't an observation base. This was a conversion base. It was probably flashed to Earth to collect specimens and then flashed back here to add them to its army. Not really what she had had in mind for this mission. She had to do something. But Julian was no longer human, and the rest were trapped. Update complete, said the tender AI. New information. It had been updating in the days they had been outside of this time stream. Perhaps it knew something new. Update me on any news regarding these bases since my last request. The Earth government has investigated your visual record and has decided that the base represents a threat. They have decreed that. Cameron held her breath. She knew what was coming next. All bases must be destroyed within moments of discovery. Cameron shook her head. Anything can be changed back. It just takes time. Negative. Government authorization has been given to Commander Lachlan Hunter to destroy the base. Cameron's heart sank. The base will be destroyed from orbit at 1745 AEST. What? Belay that order. Advise new information has been found. Yes. The information is in the base. I will get it for you. Confirmed. Cameron breathed out slowly. She didn't like lying to an AI, or the Earth government for that matter, but she had to delay the inevitable. If her entire team was going to be taken out by Lachlan, she had to find a way to save them. She opened the tender doors and went out into the dark, surprised to see that the system star was peeking over the horizon. Dawn already. Dinosaur Julian would be very happy. She walked quickly back to the installation and peered through the slit. Her team were still in their alcoves, and Julian was out the back somewhere. Resting. Recovering. Checking systems. Could she sneak inside without him knowing? Hashtag. Julian's long pink tongue flicked in and out quickly, tasting victory in the air, eager to wake the others of his team when their conversion was complete. He paced about the base, observing the flickering energies with pleasure, though his pupils narrowed to slits when he looked at one of the empty alcoves at the back. The place for the remaining member of his team. But she had escaped. There was a slight scraping sound, then nothing. He turned an ear hole towards the area. A breathing sound? Was she trying to sneak into the base again? He spun, and headed to the entrance, his tail standing up excitedly, as the hunt began to beat through his veins. The light of the dawn had started to seep through, and he grinned a sharp-toothed grin. She could not resist him now. He was sure she was just outside, waiting. Trying to work out a way to get in without him knowing. It was time to take her by surprise. He leapt out the door to capture her, and ran directly into the newly erected energy field. Momentarily stunned, he slid to the ground, unconscious. Cameron jumped out from where she was hiding, with cables in her hands, and immediately wrapped his claws in them. That should hold you for a bit. Then she turned back to see how she could release the others. Much to her chagrin, the regeneration cables had released them, and the glass doors were sliding up. The atmosphere was now no longer a problem for them, but with the base about to be destroyed, she had to find a way to get them to the tender. But how? She ran back and switched off the force field, then ran over to Dinosaur Julian. She didn't have much time left. She was sure that if she could get him into the tender, the others would follow. She grabbed his claws and dragged him to the ship, her suit helping her with his weight. She could hear a muffled voice through her suit, but couldn't understand it. She attempted to broadcast through her helmet. "I'm trying to help you, damn it." The Julian creature just hissed. Negotiating his clawed feet and swishing tail took some doing, but with his clawed hands tied in front with wire, he didn't have much strength or balance. His recent conversion hadn't given him the skills he needed to use his new body properly. She looked back to see shadowy forms climbing through the slit entrance, lurching towards the tender. They were still groggy from just waking up, and she hoped they stayed that way until she had worked out the rest of her plan. She knew she had just one chance at this. She dragged Julian's body into the tender. Get ready to return to the ship on my command, AI. No questions. All will be revealed in due course. She positioned herself in the point leader's seat and pushed the dinosaur Julian on his side into one of the chairs opposite, concealing his cabled hands, his tail uncomfortably wrapping around his legs and to the front. He grinned with his sharp teeth and said something else she couldn't understand. No doubt something about she'll never get away with this, or she's making a big mistake. As the other dinosauroids, half awake, stumbled, scrabbled and slithered on board, she simply indicated the seats with her gloved hand, making bowing motions, stroking Julian in the seat, doing her best to indicate she was on their side. She made pointing motions to all of them to indicate that they were equal. Then she bowed to them and pointed up, smiling. The dinosaurs understood that she was working with them and that she would take them to her leader. Excited, they took their seats on their sides, their tails taking up a lot of room, and Cameron shut the tender door. Immediately, it rose into the sky, the windows shining the sunlight bright into the ship, making the dinosaurs very happy. They were excited that this enemy had decided to help them and were going to enjoy taking down her world. Cameron watched them, tight-lipped. She hoped that they would be able to reverse the process, but the main thing was that they needed to survive the trip. Suddenly the first lizard began to cough, grabbing at its throat. The second as well. Another simply closed its eyes and slid to the ground. The others looked at her in surprise, before succumbing. Julian's piercing, yellow eyes narrowed at her accusingly. He'd had longer to adjust and he'd finally worked out what she was doing. He tried to reach out a clawed leg to rend her suit, but did not have enough breath left. At that moment, when the rest of the air had left the tender, the lizards collapsed unconscious, cold, and close to death. She only hoped she could make it back to the R in time. Hashtag. What you did was a great risk, said Lachlan, shaking his head. I sent the report as soon as I heard. These creatures will need to be quarantined until we can find a xenobiologist who can study them and reverse the effects. You're just lucky they went into hibernation when the cold of space hit them. Cameron nodded her head. She was just glad that she had been able to save them, no matter what form they were in. I just have one thing to do. He placed his hand on a panel, and a hologram lit up showing a bomb of octonitrocubane, inside a heat-resistant drone, leaving the ship on a slow but sure collision course with the base. He then flashed the ship to a safe distance to watch. Cameron looked at the hologram of the brown ball sadly. If she had handled this better, they could have brought this ancient technology back with them. Instead, they brought back 5 ancient alien dinosaurs. The bomb exploded, the base ruptured, and a massive crack where an energy stream from the center of the planet had been active for millions of years, broke the planet in two, forcing it out of orbit and on an eventual collision course with its star. One base down. 547 to go, said Lachlan. Well, said Cameron. There is that.